I like this game a lot, and I feel like it's my duty to show you how cool this game is. Sonic 3D Blast, the Sega Saturn version. Sorry if I sound a little aggressive there, but I really do need to stress this. I guess a bit of backstory. See, the Sega Saturn version of Sonic 3D Blast was a game I owned as a child. It was one of 3 Sonic games I owned, along with the original Sonic and Sonic & Knuckles. And it was one of like 5 Saturn games I owned, along with Daytona USA, Virtua Fighter 2, Virtua Cop, and Astal. I played a lot of this game, is the short version of the story, and I remember enjoying it quite a lot. I could never get very far, mind you. Some precision platforming in the second stage got me stuck pretty frequently, and I actually got fairly badly lost in the third stage as a child and couldn't get past there. But I remember really thinking back fondly to this game. With the rise of the internet, a lot of people started talking more and more about their games, and, you know, I found a lot of people talking a lot of really bad things about Sonic 3D Blast. Specifically, like, it was the worst Sonic game, and it was the worst Genesis game ever. And, I mean, first of all, it's not the worst Sonic game ever. Sonic Labyrinth exists. That game is atrocious. The completely unrelated but similar sounding Sonic Blast, which was a Game Gear and SMS release, was objectively, like, the worst Sonic thing ever. And if I'm just throwing out a personal grudge against a Sonic game, Tails Sky Patrol, if you want to technically count that as Sonic, that game was awful waffles. And this can't possibly be the worst Genesis game ever because Heavy Nova exists. And as I've established like 8 years ago at this point, that is like the worst game on the Irath. I often heard a lot of people basically talking nothing but smack about Sonic 3D Blast, and it kind of made me feel really bad about it because I remember just enjoying this game a lot and having a lot of fond memories of this game. Then I ended up playing Sonic Mega Collection, and that had Sonic 3D Blast on it, and I'm not going to sugarcoat it, that was the first game I played on there. I was excited for it specifically for that reason. Except, similar to how Capcom likes to give us the worst versions of Mega Man games in their collections, here's looking at you, X3 PlayStation version and the terrible PlayStation version of Mega Man 8. Sorry, that's a rant for another day. Sega, for whatever reason, just constantly seems to enjoy giving us the Genesis version. And when I first played this, I'm not gonna lie, one of the first things I said, aside from bewilderment that the soundtrack and a lot of things I remembered very fondly about the game were just different, the first thing I really thought was, oh, I get why people dislike this game now, because this is nowhere near as good as the version I played. Yeah. So I feel like I'm standing up here today to kind of defend my childhood a little bit. I quite like the Sega Saturn version of Sonic 3D Blast, and bear in mind, it's not a wildly different game from the Genesis version in any means or measure, but I still feel like it's significantly better, and I guess if nothing else, I want to try and encourage people to play this game a little bit more, because I do think it's quite good, so I am going into this completely biased and working off nostalgia a little bit, but I also did play through this entirely for a stream, and my file actually got corrupted, so we're using the slightly stuttery stream version. Apologies. Anyway, Sonic 3D Blast is kind of a misnomer, because it's not even really a Sonic game. I mean, don't get me wrong, you play as Sonic, you fight Dr. Robotnik, you can collect rings and Chaos Emeralds, and sometimes you can hang out with Knuckles and Tails, provided that you're willing to pay them for the pleasure of the experience. All that feels really superficial. This isn't really so much a Sonic game, as it is a sequel to Flicky, of all things, just in a weird top-down isometric way. The story itself features Sonic visiting his friends at the Flicky Island, only to learn that all the Flickies have been captured by Dr. Evo Eggman Robotnik and has roboticized them into evil baddies, and now Sonic has to free them and collect them and take them to dimensional rings to take them to the safe Flicky dimension, I guess. Okay, the story isn't that great for this thing, I'm not gonna lie, but they tried to find a way to make Sonic the hero in a Flicky game, and honestly, they tried to put a story to Flicky. I feel like that's impressive in its own right, but there's not really much of an actual story here at all. The gameplay itself is an isometric platformer with the key goal of freeing flickies. Like I said, this is more of a sequel to Flicky than Sonic, so there is a focus on actual flicky mechanics more than anything else. Your goal is to attack 5 different enemies in each chunk of a stage to free the flickies inside. Once you rescue the flickies, you can then take them to the dimensional ring at the end of the area and deposit them for safekeeping, allowing you to progress to the next area. And similar to Flicky itself, by depositing more flickies in your little flicky conga line at a time, you get more bonus points, for what that matters. But there is another reason to collect all the flickies at once. The flickies themselves actually have some pretty interesting mechanics because they have a physical presence. Once you gather flickies, they will circle around Sonic and follow him actively. Because they have a physical presence, they can be used to pick up items off of springs as an extended grabbing tail of sorts. And this is a really cool mechanic. I actually quite like this. Unfortunately, that's literally as far as that actually gets used. I feel like they could have probably done more with this, allowed flickies to sort of maybe be like an extended ring collection system, kind of like the lightning shield in Sonic 3 or something, just as a very, very simple off the top of my head thought. The idea of using them as a physical collection tool and increasing your reach with jumps by getting more and more flickies is a cool idea though. I do kind of like that. However, on the other side of the spectrum, because flickies have an actual hitbox and are actually, physical things that exist in this world, if they get hit by traps or enemies, they'll actually scatter. And depending on the flicky color, they have their own personalities and they react differently. And if you're not on top of them scattering, going to find them is a bit of a pain. And of course, the more flickies you have when they scatter, the bigger pain it is to find them. But on the other hand, that does make for a nice risk-reward system. Do you want to keep all your flickies and risk losing them all and having to search for them if you kind of mess up? Or do you want to safely deposit them one at a time with no risk but no chance of getting all the extra continue medals that are scattered about the world? It's kind of a neat balance thing. This game, it's not perfect. Having to find a crowd of flickies who got dislodged because of some projectile attack you didn't quite account for, it's not a lot of fun to do. But as long as you're on top of it, they don't tend to spread out too far. Speaking of freeing flickies from enemies, I think it's time we talk about the enemies a little bit because they're weird. I feel like enemy design is not really a focus in this game. And I say this with two main facts involved. First and foremost, enemies don't really attack you or actively go after you or try and really become a nuisance. Most just sort of walk back and forth in the same very, very small area and just sort of wait for you to kill them. There are a couple enemies that have like a projectile attack and they're a little bit more of a threat, but they're once again just sort of autonomously going about their own business, and really at the end of the day you're the one kind of ruining their day as opposed to vice versa. It's really weird to see these entirely passive enemies that don't seem to actually pose any real threat to you. Honestly, the biggest threat in this game comes from environmental traps, and they get more and more devious as time goes on. The first stage, Green Grove, just has little tiny mines, and they're pretty infrequent. And later on you've got spike traps and electric traps, flamethrowers out of walls. It does feel like the environmental design is more out to kill you than the actual enemies, which is an interesting idea. Although it's not necessarily the best implemented ever. Certainly the enemies aren't really much of a threat. The bosses are more of a threat than the enemies, and the bosses are, for the most part, fairly underwhelming as well, with the exception of the ones that have homing flamethrower attacks anyway. But overall, the enemies themselves aren't really that much of a threat, and the bigger issue just comes from environmental traps and focusing on getting towards the end. Indeed, this is a platformer that focuses more than anything on simply platforming. And honestly, I feel like that's more true to the roots of Sonic than many other Sonic games try to be. A lot of people tend to attribute Sonic to being a very, very fast character and his whole thing being speed, which, is understandable. That's how Sega marketed him. But if you go and play the original Sonic, that's not actually that fast a game. In fact, the whole second stage in Sonic the Hedgehog is about pushing blocks and just standing on them and waiting for lava to take you places. That's not that fast. Instead, Sonic has always been, at least in my eyes, more about precision platforming and platforming well. And this game tries to do that, and it's a bit hit and miss. It's definitely a miss when it comes to precision platforming, and that's courtesy of the fact this is an isometric game. judging distance is very, very difficult when you're trying to land on one square big platforms. It actually becomes very, very frustrating. Like I said at the top, you know, I had trouble getting past level 2 when I was a kid. And here that's no different. I still get stuck on that one stupid pit that has like one moving very small platform you have to get on, and the only way you can judge that jump is with your shadow. That kinda sucks. And to further the fact that speed isn't so much a factor, physics and speed in this game don't really mix too well. Like, there are some really big ramps that you have to like ascend and climb up, and most of them don't let you do that. It'll actually kill all momentum and won't let you climb them, and instead require you to use springs or trampolines to get up them, which is a really, really weird choice. It's not necessarily bad, except for like the one in the very last level that has like some precision platforming stuff. That's not great. To further this fact, there are a couple of power-ups. A shield that gives you a homing attack similar to Sonic Adventure, but before Sonic Adventure, so you know, this is like the OG Sonic homing attack, so to speak. Although, to be fair, this is a holdover from like the shield power-ups from Sonic 3, as well as an environmental fire shield that makes you basically invulnerable to everything in the stage you get it in. It's kind of ridiculous. And running shoes that speed you up, and they're basically a power down, honestly. They are just, you don't see them too often, but when you get them, it's more like, oh, I'm gonna get this thing and then I'm gonna run headlong into traps and stuff. Don't get the running shoes in this game. The speed up in this game, along with the physics in platforms and ramps, it's not great. But when it just has you exploring an environment and not requiring like super precision platforming, it's actually a pretty solid job of a game. Now, one of the biggest changes, at least gameplay-wise, there isn't a lot of differences between versions necessarily. One of the biggest ones, gameplay-wise, is the bonus stages, and these actually change depending on every single version you play. I don't have a lot of experience with the PC version of the game, but from what I hear, that is so fast that it's basically uncontrollable, so they had to give you so many rings that you could basically never fail it, which is, I suppose, one way to solve the problem. The Genesis version had you running around in this, like, floating bridge area, and I remember this being fairly simple as well. However, the Saturn version actually makes an entire callback to Sonic 2, where Knuckles and Tails will fly you in, drop you into this half pipe, and just tell you to go collect rings for checkpoints. This is actually kind of tricky. Not ridiculously hard, nowhere near as bad as Sonic 2, mind you, but it is a little bit tricky, and if you screw up just once or twice, you're not going to be able to get that Chaos Emerald. And, you know, it's interesting because Tails and Knuckles will both take you to these special stages, but you have to pay them for the privilege. They each require 50 rings, and you can only get one Chaos Emerald per stage, so if you already get it with one person, the other will only take you to an extra light, so you can skip them. But if you fail one, the other will take you to the Chaos Emerald, which gives you at least a little bit of leeway. And honestly, it's saving all these rings to pay off Tails and Knuckles to drop you into environments so you can get your Chaos Emeralds that really leads to a lot of challenge in this game, honestly. Because if you're not worried about collecting the Chaos Emeralds that were previously cough drops in the Genesis version for some reason, you know, not having to worry about that precision, not taking damage nonsense, you can basically play with reckless abandon and it suddenly becomes a lot fairer a game. It becomes a lot less worrying about traps and stuff, and really just more about having fun in a 3D isometric-ish environment. And I think that's pretty fun. Speaking of Chaos Emeralds, in this game, they're basically worthless. Well, not strictly speaking. If you collect all 7, you get to fight the final boss, and you get the true ending. But without them, you get one less stage, which is a boss fight that is a bit ridiculous. It takes 10 hits and it goes through 5 phases. If you're not prepared for it, it will catch you unaware. But otherwise, the game plays basically the same. There's no Super Sonic or anything whatsoever. The Chaos Emeralds are really just for unlocking the final boss fight itself. Those might ultimately not even be something worth collecting for you. But I will say that I honestly prefer the Saturn version to the Genesis version. In fact, the bonus stages when I first played the Genesis version were the second thing I noticed. The first was that the stages just weren't as good visually or audibly, which kind of brings us a little bit to the presentation. See, the presentation of Sonic 3D Blast on the Saturn is ridiculous. Like, I've actually been playing this really crappy, cheap knockoff Chinese handheld that plays Genesis games in my free time, and it has Sonic 3D Blast in it. And I've been running through these stages just looking at them thinking, these are really fake, bad plastic environments, just looking at them anyway. But playing the Saturn version, you know, suddenly these fake plastic grasses have like these flowers that bounce up and down like in Green Hill Zone, and it has these little moles digging tunnels out of hills and stuff. And sure, they're very, very simple animation loops, and they're not really all that impressive or anything, but it's just these small details being basically everywhere in this game that makes these environments jump to life. Honestly, it's such a small thing, but it makes an absolute world of difference. It breathes life into this game from a visual perspective. And audio-wise, well, audio-wise is probably one of the biggest detractors for the Genesis version, honestly. Let me just, for a moment, if you'll indulge me, do a little bit of an audio comparison. Because I'm not exactly a master of music theory. I can't tell you everything about the nuance of sound and stuff, but I can tell you that I think one of these songs is just infinitely better than the other. And it's not because it's CD quality or anything, I mean, that is the case, but I just think that the songs are completely different and infinitely better on the Saturn. I should also stress that when I jump into the Saturn footage, this is going to be a slightly different level. That's because I'm playing the Japanese version, and they swapped Act 1 and Act 2's themes in the Japanese version versus the English version. No idea why. Anyway, this is Stage 2, Act 1, Rusty Ruins on the Genesis. And this is Stage 2, Act 1, Rusty Ruins on the Saturn. I mean, not to get all nostalgic and reminiscent or anything, but when I first heard that chanting in the background, I thought there was a ghost in my room. I was so freaked out. And growing up now, it's honestly one of my favorite songs in possibly all of Sonic. It feels like the Genesis version is a song that's there and that's fine, but the Saturn version just feels so much better and so much more fitting. It's creepy and spooky and a little bit sort of downbeat, and it sort of just oozes how much these like decrepit ruins you're exploring just emanate in terms of sound. Wind will howl through like these ruins and create like this weird chanting sound, and it's like someone thought about these environments and actually wrote that song. And yes, I'm absolutely gushing about literally this one song, and this one song is why you need to buy the Saturn version. Absolutely, that's exactly what I'm saying. But damn it, the presentation is so much better in the Saturn version. And sure, part of that's just the fact that it is CD quality and it is on, you know, better hardware, but it's a completely different song too, and the same goes for every other song on the soundtrack. When I first played the Genesis version and started up level 1, stage 1, I was disappointed to not hear the awesome piano riff at the start of the song that just said, oh, this is gonna be awesome, this is like an amazing upbeat adventure, oh, I'm gonna love this, you know, and instead we just got some okay music, but it just didn't feel as good, you know? I think that overall the presentation to the Genesis version is serviceable, but the Saturn one makes this world come alive. Now, whether or not it's necessarily one you want to be platforming in because it's an isometric game. That's, that's for you to decide. But I think that if you're gonna play this game, you gotta get the Saturn version just for that presentation, damn it. It's so damn good. Now, if you want a copy of Sonic 3D Blast on the Saturn, which I hope you do, because this game is pretty special, and I think it's a lot better than people make it out to be, at least from the Genesis version. Cheapest one I'm seeing right now on eBay, $45. That's not bad. That's not bad. The Genesis version I'm seeing for about $10, but I think the price difference between the two is absolutely in the Saturn's favor. Yes, it's pricier, and yes, it's on the Saturn, but own a Saturn is what I'm saying. But it's just so much better. There's also a PC version. I don't know a ton about it. I know that the bonus stages in it are kind of ridiculous, but I also know that the developers, or at least one of the people who worked on it, came back and repatched the game so it would actually add like an extra enemy and I think one or two little features, which is kind of a neat idea. I appreciate that after all this time it's still kind of getting updates in like a definitive edition, though I still would recommend you get the Saturn version just because I think it's personally the best. But that's the thing. I went into this entirely biased. I will make no bones about it. This is a game I'm very nostalgic for. I'm not going to say it's the greatest game of all time. I'm not even going to say it's anywhere near the best Sonic game. I mean, hell, for me that'll be Sonic Adventure 2 Battle any day. Then probably like Sonic CD and Sonic 3 and Knuckles. Or Sonic Jam, that was a great compilation too. Also on the Saturn. You know what? Go get Sonic Jam as well. But I just wanted to talk about this game for a little bit and really try and give it a fair shake. I don't think it's perfect. I think the weird physics loss when it comes to ramps, I think the precision platforming is awful. But outside of that, I think it's a fun, serviceable, isometric thing. Sure, it's not the greatest Sonic game of all time, but it's nowhere near as bad as the similarly named Sonic Blast or the awful, awful Tails Sky Patrol. I have a personal vendetta against that game. Screw that game. But I went into this wanting to show people how cool Sonic 3D Blast on the Saturn was. And, when I was a kid, I didn't get all the hate this game got. And it wasn't until I played the Genesis version that I started to understand a little bit better. Ultimately, I think that Sonic 3D Blast was not the game that people wanted from Sega. And with Sonic Extreme in the state it was, they didn't have a lot of choices. It was kind of what little of a new game Sonic Jam actually was, although, to be fair, that was the entire game. It was built from the ground up, even though it was a compilation. Very, very cool. Gotta talk about Sonic Jam a little bit more later. A little bit of, like, the Nights into Dreams Sonic bit, and, of course, Sonic R. I don't want to talk about Sonic R anytime soon, ugh. But my point was never to say that this was the best game ever, and you need to throw out all the other Sonic games because this is the one definitive thing. Because it's not. But it certainly doesn't deserve all the hate it gets. I think it's a perfectly fine isometric platformer. Maybe not a great Sonic game, but I mean, I'd say it's a really great flicky game. That's coming from a guy who hates flicky. I actually quite like this game, though. I think Sonic 3D Blast, especially on the Saturn, is the game worth your time. Maybe not the Genesis version, but this version for sure. And if nothing else, listen to the soundtrack. Please, if you do nothing else with this game, just listen to the soundtrack because it is awesome. But that was a little bit of my childhood in Sonic form, and me trying to discover why people hate this game so much, and ultimately me trying to defend a little bit of it that I thought was actually pretty good. Sonic got all the Chaos Emeralds, and because this was a special screen, we're gonna freeze the game. Also, 3 of the Chaos Emeralds are blue. And there was no silver Chaos Emerald. I'm offended by that.